Welcome to the Change of Him podcast. My name is Gegard Mousasi. This is episode 49. Just think, we are one away from the big 5-0. That special announcement is coming soon, but we are on the brink of just great success in the past 5.5 months of doing the Change of Him podcast. And with that being said, there is just so much as far as how people embrace their change and really understanding all walks of life in their journeys of perceiving what goes on around them. And this person is no exception to the rule. I want to announce to you, Sunjay Mathews. Sunjay, how are you today?
Hey, what's going on, man? Thanks for having me. I'm just as excited to hear who number 50 is going to be too, but I'm excited to be on the brink of that. So thanks for reaching out. Thanks for including me. I'm geeked to be here.
Absolutely. So something I love to ask all of my guests, especially on the first question, is what your childhood was like growing up.
Yeah, so my childhood was very simple. I was raised by a single mom, single mom swag who, now as a parent, with a beautiful wife. I have no idea how she did it all on her own, man. Like, it takes a village. I think that's true in your career and your personal life, but somehow, some way, she raised me, and there was never a moment where I felt like I was missing out on anything. She was my mom, she was my dad, she was my confidant, my supporter, my educator. And it was cool because even though, she raised me by herself, we lived with my grandparents, her parents, who also helped out. So, it was sort of unique where like I also had, a second mom, and, my grandfather always played the father figure for me. And, we're from West Orange, New Jersey. And, just a very simple immigrant household, very focused on education, very focused on discipline, but just very simple. And I feel like with technology and the internet and all these distractions, sometimes I look back to how simple life was, where there was imagination and things like that. But yeah, that was my childhood. Just raised by a single mom who I still don't know how she did it. I feel like she did a good job, with me. I feel like I ended up okay, but yeah.
I feel like, to your point about imagination, and this is just a hot take as far as being within my 30s myself and just understanding what life is like, especially growing up without the sense of technology right at your fingertips. It does get interesting because when you look at things linear, I feel like your imagination goes full circle. Like you go a full 360 in how you envision things
Yeah.
because you don't have things just surrounding you that's technologically influenced. And I feel like when you're playing with other kids at that age and everything like that, I feel like you were kind of on the brink of discovering more, and it spoke to the technology, the internet boom within the late 90s and stuff like that. I think that was reflective as far as the imagination of our time.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough, right? Like I'm of the mindset that too much of anything is a bad thing, right? So I'm not of the mindset, and look, parents got to do whatever works for them. I'm a huge proponent of not giving people parenting advice because you just have to do what works for you, and everyone is doing their best, right? But for us, our approach is we're not going to completely remove screens or technology because that
Yeah.
would be somewhat silly, right? But at the same time, we don't want him to be so addicted to it that he's not able to sort of to your point and use his imagination. It's always in life, in your career, it's always about finding that balance, right? And easier said than done. On certain days, maybe it veers a little bit more to technology, and maybe on some days it veers a little bit more, to being outside and just keeping things simple. But it's always about trying to find that balance so that he's not left behind as technology continues to advance and is such a integral part of what we're trying to do as a community, as a society. But at the same time, even when you want to ideate on those technologies, having that imagination that, our children, our future, our youth can develop and apply to that technology is super critical. So you need both.
Absolutely. And synonymous with technology is entertainment in so many ways. So such a rabbit hole to even go down the list why. But I want to ask you, when was the first time you felt like entertainment was going to be part of your career?
Honestly, it was a lot later than I'd like to admit. I always loved entertainment. I always loved sports, and it was always, you know, a career goal. But it was also like quite difficult to get into, just because it just is, right? It's a very sexy industry that a lot of people want to break into, and I made lots of attempts, lots of job interviews that just sort of never panned out. And then I think it was important to be persistent, to have a support system around you that, kept you up despite lots of rejections. And then continuing to find, different ways to break into the industry, right? There's that saying that insanity is, doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result, right? So if you go one way and it's just not really working out, you try something else. So I honestly, if I'm really thinking about this and reflecting on it, I think the birth of my son probably was that, that light bulb moment where I said, look, you know what? If I'm not going to be with my family as much as I would like, I want to make sure I'm doing something that I'm proud of, something that I really enjoy, so that, when he grows up and asks me, what do you do, or talks about what I do, or I'm speaking about it with such an excitement that, was missing in the earlier parts of my career. So honestly, like 6, 7 years ago, not that long. Always something I wanted, just never something I thought was attainable, which, now when people reach out and ask for advice, I challenge them to learn from my mistake, right? Don't doubt yourself. Don't, just because something's hard, it doesn't mean it's not
Of
possible.
course.
And, you know, just because it's something you want, I mean, that's why it's not easy too, right? Like, it's not like you just apply and you're working at Google or Twitter or, the National Basketball Association. It's going to take effort, it's going to take persistence, and it's going to take a lot of staying positive, despite a lot of roadblocks and obstacles. But yeah,
I,
that's sort of.
I also think it takes the vetting process of your own reflection in the mirror too. Despite how everyone else perceives you as a person and how you're going through the ropes and getting from point A to point B, I think to have that vetting process with yourself and understanding what you're capable of and what you need to work on before reaching those capabilities, it has that essential technique as far as how you're building confidence along the way.
Yeah, I mean, I think being self-aware, that's what you're describing, right? It's just being self-aware.
Exactly.
It's understanding, there's a reason this industry is so hard to break into. Understanding why, some of your earlier attempts maybe didn't pan out the way you thought, learning from those experiences, right? Like, failure is a good thing, right? And I truly mean this. I wasn't exaggerating. Like, I applied to like at least 100 of these like entertainment, sports related, technology driven jobs that I did not get. And each one was painful and each one was a failure. But it's taking those failures and learning from them and understanding why I didn't get the job, or understanding why I didn't have the background to be as, attractive of a candidate, so that when, my first job in the sports tech space, which was at FanDuel, came around, I was able to get it. And it's funny to think about, like, all those jobs that I thought I was, I'm like, I can't believe I didn't get that job. Like, oh my God, I'm so happy I didn't, because everything happens for a reason. And, I'm very satisfied with my career trajectory. And, I needed all those misses, for that first opportunity to sort of play out the way it did. So I am a huge believer that things happen for the right reason at the right time. And you sort of like have to let the universe sort of, make that happen. I mean, you can't just sit on your ass and expect it to happen,
Exactly.
but at the same time, sort of understand that when things happen, they happen for a reason, and try and make the most of it, and that's sort of like the right approach to, this very weird year, right? Like, you can sit and be depressed that, we're wearing masks, or, quarantined and not traveling as much as we would like, or you can sort of focus on the positives and find, opportunities in this additional time that you're finding while working from home, or spending more time with your family, or trying to learn something that you always sort of put off because you were so focused on, commuting to work and commuting back. So yeah, I just think it's really important to take that approach to a lot of things in your life, including your career.
Yes. And speaking of which, now, as your journey has definitely had so many different steps along the way, what inspired your overall direction to get into law?
Um, I wish I had a really good answer. I watched a lot of Law and Order, and I thought it was cool.
Hey, look, it's a fair assessment that way, right?
I mean, truly, like, and I don't do any of that work, and I didn't, I'm a corporate lawyer. I've very rarely ever been in a courtroom, but truly, that was it. I watched a Law and Order. I watched a lot of Law and Order. I wanted to make a difference, and I thought, this would be a cool way to do it. And I always, once again, going back to that self-awareness point, I knew I was a good writer. I knew I was a good public speaker. And these were just things that would have benefited myself in a legal career, right? And the other thing I liked about law is that it allows for a lot of optionality. And if you go to med school, you end up being a doctor. If you have a master's in engineering, or those are the things you do. But I feel like with a law degree, if you think about it, there's so many options, right? You could be president of the United States. You could be a politician. You could be a teacher. You could be a business person, or you could be a lawyer. And then even in the legal field alone, there's like so many different ways to go, in the non-public sector, in entertainment, in litigation, in things like Law and Order, where you're like an ADA or a defense attorney. So at a young age, when I wasn't entirely sure what I wanted to do with my life, I kind of had an idea. It was nice to sort of pick a continuing education opportunity that allowed me lots of avenues for success. And that was important to me. And I'm really happy, you know, that's how it played out.
Absolutely. And to kind of narrate where you are today as the head of legal for DAZN, what was it like to be part of a platform that has advanced from linear television?
Yeah. So this happens all the time, and we need to fix this, but it's actually pronounced DAZN.
DAZN.
Which,
Gotcha.
well, totally fine. I
No
mean,
problem.
it's it's cool, man. I mean, one thing I love about working at DAZN is that we're on the cutting edge, and being very innovative. I do think, a lot of people are cutting the cord, especially in the younger demographics, and we are sort of speaking to that, that youthful generation. Candidly, if you talk to kids nowadays, they don't really watch TV the way you and I did growing up, right? They consume content in an entirely different way, in snippets on their phone, on their iPad. There's no real reason to have like a cable subscription that requires a box and a 3-year contract. And, if you want to pause it because you're going on vacation for a month, like you can't, like, it's just, there hasn't been enough innovation there. And what I like about DAZN, which is a relatively young company, right, is, that they're coming in and trying to disrupt stuff and trying to fix problems, and provide fans and sports fans and consumers like content anywhere at a very reasonable price, with a lot of flexibility. And it's cool to be a part of a company that's open to innovation, open to changing, open to pivoting. I think when you're in a more entrenched industry, like linear television, it's harder to pivot. It's harder to change because you're just have so many established approaches to things. But for us as a young, startup is still like technically the wrong word, because like we've clearly started, right? Like we're in 200 countries, and we're doing great things. It's just cool that in COVID, which was a challenge for all of us, right? It was cool to see how leadership was able to pivot and take learnings from this approach, and see it as an opportunity to sort of take a step back and see how we can, move forward with the momentum that we had pre-COVID.
Yeah. And to that point, one of the things that I just saw right away with you is your willingness to be comfortable with being uncomfortable. What do you think changed your mindset overall to live by that approach?
Maybe it was my mom, right? Like, being a single mom is definitely uncomfortable, and she sort of just like rose to the challenge. I also think it's maybe just something that's like inherently in my approach to things where I have a relatively positive attitude. There's not a lot that kind of like, brings me down, because when you really think about it, everything's about perspective. And, just having a roof over your head and clothes and food, like you're in like the 1% compared to like so many people in the world, right? So when things kind of like, fall apart in your career and your personal life, it to me it's just sort of like, it's unfortunate, but one, I'm still super blessed and we'll figure it out. And then I think that approach to being uncomfortable also comes from that optimistic attitude where, when I have challenges, look, at work, I have challenges all the time, things that I've never seen before. And that comes with being in a, you know, disruptive industry as opposed to something that's a bit more entrenched. When you work in an entrenched industry, the problems that you see, not always, but mostly, are things that you've seen before or your, previous colleagues have seen before. And it's just, oh, like, what do we do when that happened 5 years ago or 10 years ago? For us, it's like, oh, like we weren't around 10 years ago, or the technology we're using, like regulations haven't even caught up to them yet. Right. So for me, I view those challenges, to some, they're like, oh my God, like, how do I do this? This has never been done before. For me, it's just like an opportunity to shine. It's an opportunity to learn.
Yeah,
It's an
that's a
opportunity.
very good way to look at that, because it is so easy to be entrenched in templates and establishing, not so much to establish the templates because that's desiring towards the innovation for what you're doing, but then also, let's say, like, if you're in another company or something like that, it typically takes templates to establish solutions where things could become redundant in how you handle things, just with like customer service, acquisitions, and what have you. So it is a very admirable thing to be seeing that in a relatively new company, if I'm not mistaken, 5 years now, right?
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
100%. And I also think, companies like DAZN, or just, companies generally that are a bit more disruptive in sectors and industries, they attract those types of people who like challenges, who like, you know, to do issues of first impression and try and solve for problems, right? And then I think, that allows for those types of companies to, use their imagination, going back to our earlier conversation, right? About being imaginative and figuring out, like, all right, are we looking at this problem from the right perspective? Let's get some more people and let's, like, whiteboard some solutions and figure it out, because, you know, usually it's something that's never been, has never been an issue before.
I think something. So I was looking at what your content is so far, and I like the direction it's going in. I wanted to ask you, without disclosing anything that you're probably in contract and negotiations for, like, this is more of a personal aspiration question for you. Like,
Sure.
what do you envision your content to look like maybe a year from now? Like, what would you like to see on the vision board of like what you have for the zone?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think DAZN would love to have like the premier, rights in the US, like the NBA, the NFL, but those are obviously with existing contracts. So I think what we've done, which I think is actually really smart, is servicing a sport fan that has been underserved by like traditional media and traditional broadcasters, which is boxing and MMA. And like, to be clear, I'm just speaking about the US proposition,
Yep.
right? Like, obviously every country that we're in has a different sports rights portfolio based on what's available and what we've been able to negotiate and acquire, right? Like in Canada, for instance, we have NFL rights, Major League Baseball. We have, EPL exclusively, like pretty, tier one sports properties. And in the US, we have tier one sports properties in the sports that we're playing in, which is primarily boxing. And what I think is really cool is we continue to put on fights that people really want to see, both from a mainstream perspective and a boxing hardcore perspective. And what we're doing is making the sport more accessible with a reasonable price point. Like, I don't know how familiar you are with like the pay-per-view, concept, but people paying $90 for one fight, $110 for one fight, $50 for a fight that's not even that major, but like that's the only way to watch it. And there are fans out there that are paying it, which shows how much they love the sport. That passion is there, right? And what we're trying to do is say, I mean, one, let's service those fans that are so passionate, but do it in a way that's more, amenable to their economics, one. And two, let's make it more accessible to people. Like, if you don't know enough about boxing, but you want to try it out, and you're like, oh, this fight has been marketed great, I'm gonna watch it. Wait, I have to pay $60 to watch it? Even like that's just too much of a barrier for entry, right? But the approach that we have, which is $19.99 for a full month, not just for one fight, for the full month, or $99 for the full year. I mean, those are, conversations you could have with yourself and your wallet where you're like, you know what? That's a pretty good deal. I like boxing. This has been marketed. These seem like a pretty impressive calendar of fights. Let me try it out. So that's the approach in the US. But otherwise, just continue, acquiring, premium rights, for the fans that want to see it, to service our customers. And in addition, continue to make like cutting and riveting original programming is an important part of our strategy, right? Obviously, live sports is our bread and butter, because that's what we all want to see, right? We want to watch the match when it's happening. But at the same time, I think a lot of us are also realizing we want to learn more about the athlete. We want to know what drives them. We want to know what their childhood was like, right? We want to see them on podcasts talking about what got them into boxing, or got them into soccer, or got them into whatever sport that they are. And we think that we have done a great job telling those stories, and we want to continue to do so, and let people see these personalities in a very different light than they see them, whether it's on the field or on the court or in the boxing ring.
Could not agree more with that. And it seems like a promising direction in that regard. I was just curious, because we were talking a lot about just the aspect of us growing up and within the 90s of comparisons and stuff like that. Have you ever thought about maybe doing like a cartoon segment with like DAZN? Has that ever been like maybe an option as far as exploring a different audience to kind of get more people engaged with you?
Look, what I like about us is there's nothing that's off the table,
right?
But we're also extremely data-driven business, right? So if someone internally or externally can show us, hey, these people want to see the cartoon, it's like, well, then let's make a cartoon. You know what I mean? If the data shows us that people no longer want to see the cartoon because we tried it out, it was exciting, but now it's sort of, the interest is no longer there, then we'll pause it, or we'll try and, re-envision it. We were one of the first to give, Logan Paul an opportunity to fight in a boxing ring on our broadcast. Obviously there are a lot of people now doing that, but we were one of the first. So for us, there's nothing that's off the table, as long as it, makes sense for what we're trying to do. Obviously both, from a bottom line perspective, but also from a vision perspective and a brand perspective, then sure, why not, right? But like, I think it's that open-mindedness and that ability to test and try and innovate, that I think will help us as we continue, establishing ourselves as a major player in the sports vertical, not just in the US, but worldwide. Like I said, we just, as of December 2020, launched in 200 countries. I don't think there's anyone that could say that.
Remarkable. Oh my, yeah.
I don't know how we did it.
Big thing to be proud of, man.
Yeah, definitely. And obviously it takes a village.
Absolutely. Final question that I also like to ask all of my guests for, what is the biggest change you want to see for yourself?
Wow. Biggest change I want to see for myself. Wow, you might have stumped me there. I'm pretty happy with like this is the crazy thing. I truly, like, this sounds lame, but like I'm pretty happy with who I am and who I've developed into as a person. I'm very comfortable with like who I am right now. I guess if you asked me this question 2 years ago, 3 years ago, I think I'd have some answers about, having more confidence in myself and my capabilities and my career and, believing in the things that I wanted to accomplish and like putting them out there. But like, honestly, like I'm very like happy, truly. Like I'm very happy with where I am, personally and in my career. I'm very happy with who I've become. Does that mean I'm not going to continue to grow and evolve? Of course. And that's not what I'm saying. I just haven't identified what those changes need to be yet. As of right now, like in this moment, I'm good with Sunjay. I'm good with who I am and who I've become. And as new challenges arise and things change in the industry, in the world, in my relationships, I hope I will just continue to evolve as a person.
And I think as a final point, also before I close, this is something I want to say, kind of to what you were saying, your name can really be the volume as far as who you are as a person throughout your life. And for the
Yep.
changes that are inevitable that come towards everybody, that name of yours and what you've been through to get to the contentness where you are today, it's going to prepare you in a lot of ways to combat that change and make sure that you are willing to grow from it.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. I could not have said it better. I mean, which is why you're the one hosting the podcast, right? Uh, but totally agree. Totally on the same page.
Awesome. So, nonetheless, that concludes episode 49 for the Change Within podcast. For those who want to check us out but have never had the chance to yet, please do so on Anchor, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. Sunjay, thank you very much for joining me today and have a great rest of your night.
Of course, man. Thanks for having me. Really appreciate it. This was fun.
Absolutely. Thank you.